Okay, take three. Welcome back to Critical Wade Theory, and today we're going to be looking at a classic tale on the silver screen. We're pulling back the longbow and heading into the greenwood for a hidden gem from 1967 called A Challenge for Robin Hood. And I have to admit, I originally didn't think I would enjoy this movie. I thought maybe I'd be bored by it, or that I would even fall asleep and not just because I'm tired. But I was worried I would find it boring, but actually quite the opposite. I like this one. It kept my attention, and I think it has rewatch value. It's the whoosh of the arrow, perhaps. This, for some people, wouldn't be Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, and it sure isn't the Hollywood, like Kevin Costner version. But this one's got its own sword swinging, swashbuckling charm, courtesy of the legendary British studio best known for Blood, Bats, and Dracula, Hammer Film Productions. Yep, Hammer Horror doing Robin Hood, and in my opinion, doing it pretty well. Released in 1967, as I said, A Challenge for Robin Hood is a bold little outlier in Hammer's catalog, a studio famous for gothic horror, suddenly turning its lens on one of England's most legendary folk heroes. Directed by C.M. Pennington Richards, the film clocks in at a lean 93 minutes, and it wastes no time getting to the good stuff. Treason, boy's father gets killed. There's betrayal, sword fights, and of course, robbing the rich to give to the poor, which I prefer over the alternative that we're so accustomed to, where the rich are finding new ways to rob from the poor. Barry Ingham stars as Robin de Courtenay, a nobleman falsely accused of treason by his scheming cousin, Sir Roger. Robin flees into Sherwood Forest, where he ditches the silk tunics, picks up a longbow, and becomes the outlaw legend we all know. And that's the simple and straightforward vibe of this movie. The tone, it's not really anything too shocking or surprising, just swashbuckling with a bit of grit. Picture bold colors, clashing blades, and a band of merry men that actually look like they've lived in the woods for a little bit. While it's not horror, Hammer's fingerprint is still there. The movie has a rugged edge and no nonsense energy. Think, classic Saturday matinee vibes, but with a little bit more bite. While it's not the type of movie that I would watch every single day. It's a fun one. I enjoyed it. James Hayter returns to the role of Friar Tuck. He played that character back in Disney's 1952 story of Robin Hood. So it adds some continuity and a nostalgic charm for the fans of the Disney movie. They would surely recognize him, unless they have really bad memories or something. And John Arnott, Arnatt, turns up as the Sheriff of Nottingham. And here's a fun fact that's not really particularly relevant to everyone out there, but he also showed up decades later in an episode of the British sitcom Keeping Up Appearances, which my grandma watched religiously. So while I looked up John Arnott in the IMDb search, I was pleasantly surprised to learn that, hey, he was on one of my grandmother's favorite shows, and it really kind of added something to me. The look and the feel, it's it's a visually sort of predictable movie. It's a Robin Hood movie. You're probably not going to get like a bunch of psychedelic scenes or whatever. A challenge for Robin Hood works well enough, though admittedly, I'm not an expert on the clothing of the time, so as far as that goes, I'm not really that much of an expert or anything. So whether it was typically more bland or had more flair than what they're showing on the screen, I'm not really sure. But even if you're not a scholar of medieval fashion, it just feels right to me. I would say the sets and props immerse you well enough to forget what was likely a modest budget for this movie. So I found it to be authentic. Again, I'm no expert. Maybe their clothing would have actually been flashier. Maybe it wouldn't have been as flashy as it is. I don't know. So if you have an opinion on the decorations in the movie or the fashions, the clothing, or any of those sort of details, go ahead and let me know about that. I'm curious about how accurate this movie is. And then there's the action. You have archery duels, ambushes in the woods, blade on blade combat, and it's a little more scrappy than polished, but it seems realistic to me. And it's all the better for not seeing or not seeming all polished. It's got a pulse because of that. It feels like the characters are a little bit more real because it doesn't seem. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it was choreographed for maximum action or whatever. And to be honest, I can't say I recall the score, the music in the movie much, but it didn't get in the way, at least. And when it comes to composers I have talked to in the film industry or on television, one of the things they've told me frequently is that a composer's job is actually not to distract too much attention from everything else on the screen. It's to sort of augment it and to help you get immersed in the movie without distracting you from the movie with whatever sounds are there. So it must have contributed to the overall vibe of the movie. It's an adventure, and you're probably not going to be there to listen to the music exactly anyway. So where does it sit in the Robin Hood filmography? I'm no expert on Robin Hood, so there are definitely people out there who would be having stronger opinions on that than me. But I think this movie is probably better than a lot of people would suggest. You know, I think I think some people might say, it's a mediocre movie or something like that. But I liked it. It's somewhere in the middle. It's not likely to be considered as iconic as Errol Flynn's, as brooding as Russell Crowe's, or as marketable as Kevin Costner's. Remember that movie where it had that Brian Adams song that was a hit, where everything I do it for you. I'm singing it really badly there, but you, you get the idea. It was a sappy song, and it was tied to this, that Robin Hood movie. I think this movie though is respectable and a standalone adventure that delivers exactly what it promises. You don't need to see the other Hammer Robin Hood movies. Yes, they did have two more. Those were called The Men of Sherwood Forest, or Sword of Sherwood Forest was the other one. But you don't need to see those in order to jump into this one. It's self contained, there's no extended origin story fatigue, no franchise baggage. In fact, it's surprisingly straightforward, not bogged down by excessive artsy fartsy fluff. I just like it because it was straightforward like that. It's just a good, clean medieval romp with enough charisma to carry it. So a challenge for Robin Hood might not be the most famous take on the legend, but it's worth a watch, and I might even rewatch it at some point. So it's a reminder that Robin Hood doesn't need to be reimagined to be fun. Sometimes all it takes is a bow, a band of outlaws, and a studio willing to swap capes and coffins for cloaks and crossbows. So if you're a fan of old school adventure, British cinema, or just want to see what happens when Hammer steps outside of the crypt, this one's worth tracking down. So until next time, this is Wade, and you've been listening to critical wade theory.